Message today, we're talking about a hero's crew. A hero's crew. We're in our series Epic, and you can go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Judges chapter 6. We're going to pick up right where we left off last week. We'll be in Judges chapter 6. And we're talking Epic, which you guys remember is a long poem narrating deeds and adventures of heroic or legendary acts, legendary figures. And so this is from Ephesians 2:10. This is our verse, kind of our core verse for this series. It says, we have become his, talking about God's, we have become his poetry, which means finished masterpiece, poema, a recreated people that will fulfill the destiny he has given each of us. For we are joined to Jesus, the Anointed One. Even before we were born, God planned in advance our destiny and the good works we would do to fulfill it. So before you were born, you had a destiny. Before you were born, you had a purpose that God put in you, and he is determined to make you that finished epic poema, that finished masterpiece that he wants you to be. And so as we've been talking about our identity and how we get our identity from God. God gives us our identity. In the last couple of weeks, I've talked about how our authority flows from our identity, not from our activity. And this is really important. Our authority flows from our identity, not our activity. Now think about Jesus for just a minute on this. So Jesus, when he started his ministry, he goes to the Jordan River. John the Baptist is there. John the Baptist baptizes him. As soon as Jesus comes up out of the water, heaven opens up, and everybody, including Jesus, hears an audible voice saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." All right, so Jesus hears the Father from heaven declare him as his only Son. And then Jesus goes into the wilderness to be tempted. The Holy Spirit leads him into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And as he is now think about this, the Holy Spirit led him there. So Jesus is now in the wilderness, and what does the devil come to tempt Jesus in? What's the question that the devil asked Jesus? If you're the Son of God, turn this stone into bread, right? And then he goes on again, and he later says, if you're the Son of God, jump off of this high place, and you'll be saved. The devil came to attack Jesus's identity so that he could cut off his authority. See, our authority flows from our identity. And so when Jesus was in the wilderness, and I believe he was being tempted just like all of us get tempted, he didn't actually hear the audible voice. He didn't recognize it as Satan until the third temptation. But as he's going through this process, he's just wondering, is that real? Did I really hear the voice of God? Is that really who I am? And then he engages and recognizes who Satan is. He steps up, he accepts his identity. And then of course he does all these wonderful miracles and all these things. But notice it wasn't his miracles that defined who he was. His miracles proved who he was, but he always pointed back to the Father, who the Heavenly Father was. So Jesus himself never looked at what he did to define his identity. It's who he was in his Father. He always referenced Father as his Father, and he was the Son, and that was his identity. So now this is why this is so important for us today. We're going to see this in Gideon. Our identity is formed by the reflection of ourselves we perceive from others. Okay, now this is important. Our identity is formed by the reflection of ourselves we perceive from others. Your crew, your friends, those who you allow in your inner circle are the ones who will set your identity. Now this is so key. Now do you realize that I can't see my face right now, right? Y'all can see my face, either looking at me or looking at a screen. You can see my face, but I can't see my face. And I can't see myself seeing my face. Even if I look at the screen, I can see the side of my face, but I can't look in my eyes, right? It's just not possible. And the thing is, that's kind of how it is with our identity. I don't know what I look like, but you know what I look like. I don't know who I am, but you can help me know who I am. And so when I spend time with God, when I spend time with the Father, this is 2 Corinthians 3:18, as we spend time in Jesus' presence, we're transformed into more and more likeness of who Jesus is. So as I stand before Jesus, I become more and more like him. That's why we spend time with God. But also the people that I associate with reinforce my identity. Now, this is why as parents, it's so important that we choose who our kids' friends are, right? We all know this as parents. As our kids are growing up and as we're going into different seasons of life, it's so important who their friends are because their friends will begin to shape our children's identity. Why? Because we look to others to define who we are. And so we look to God, but we also look to others to reinforce who we're seeing from God. And if we're looking in the wrong places, if we're looking at the wrong people, if we're connected with the wrong friends, if we've got the wrong people around us, what will happen is they will begin to give us a false identity, a false view of who we are, and we will then not accept the identity that God is trying to give us. And it actually begins to compete. So you have two kinds of friends. You have friends in your life that help reinforce your identity in Christ. And then we have people in our life who would try to distract us from that. They would try to pull us away. They would try to make us something different. Remember, when Jesus was even with Peter, he distinguished Peter in the same mode. He said at one point, when Peter said, "You're the Christ, the Son of the living God," Jesus is excited. This is, he's like, "Absolutely, this is who you called me to be. And you're right, Peter. This was revealed to you by my Father in heaven." And he's all excited because it's revealing his identity. But a bit later, Peter's trying to distract him, and Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." Now, why did he say that? Well, it was because Peter was trying to pull Jesus off of who God said that Jesus was. And so Jesus had to correct Peter for doing that. So we're going to see this now in Gideon, because it is critical that we choose the people that are in our inner circle. Now, we all interact with all kinds of people. We go to work with people, we're going to school with people, we have neighbors, friends, family, all of that. And we have concentric circles of people that are around us. And what I'm saying is we have to choose our crew carefully, because they're the ones that are ultimately going to help us set our identity. So let's see this in Judges chapter 6, going to pick it up in verse 33, right where we left off last week. I said, so soon after what? It was soon after Gideon had torn down the Asherah poles and he'd made the altar to the Lord and dealt with all of that. So soon after that, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east formed an alliance against Israel, crossed the Jordan River, camping in the valley of Jezreel. There was 145,000 men. This is later in the text, but we see it's 145,000 men have come now to attack Israel. Then the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon with power. He blew a ram's horn as a call to arms, and the men of the clan of Ebenezer came to him. He also sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, summoning their warriors, and all of them responded. And so I just want to pause right there. We'll keep going in the text here in just a minute. So here's Gideon. He's in this valley. It's the valley of Jezreel, and it's this small valley. So imagine Palo Canyon. If you've been to Palo Canyon, at one of its wider places, this valley is not a very big valley. You can see it when we travel to Israel. It's a relatively small valley. So 145,000 men who have come into this valley to attack Israel are camped there in the valley. Everybody can see them. Anybody in the mountain, you can see the people, you can see the tents, you can see the guards walking around. I mean, it's a very easy thing to see all of these men there. And so Gideon stands up on the hillside just across the way, and he blows the ram's horn, and everybody would have heard. The armies, the enemy armies would have heard, the people in the surrounding areas would have heard. So Gideon is clearly under the influence of the Lord, and he's saying, "Come on, guys, it's time to fight." So a lot of people start coming. Verse 36, then Gideon said to God, "If you are truly going to use me to rescue Israel as you promised, prove it to me in this way. I'll put a wool fleece on the threshing floor tonight. If the fleece is wet with dew in the morning, but the ground is dry, then I will know that you're going to help me rescue Israel as you promised." And that is just what happened. Then Gideon got up early the next morning. He squeezed the fleece and wrung it out in a whole bowl full of water. And then he goes on, he does it again. The next night he says, "God, if it really is you, I want to do this again," but reversed it, dry and wet. And he did it the opposite way. So here's the thing. Gideon came, and he knew what God was calling him to do. He stood up boldly and he proclaimed it by blowing the trumpet blast, alerting the enemy that he was assembling the armies. But then he said, "I want to ask God a question." And he goes to God and he asks this question: "If you're truly going to use me." Now notice he committed. Sometimes Gideon gets a bad rap here because it's like he, didn't have faith, but that wasn't the case. He just wanted to know, he just wanted a confirmation that God was going to use him. He was looking to have his faith stirred up. He was looking for a strengthening of faith, and he was going to God to do that. And so my first point is this: a prophetic confirmation increases our faith and reinforces our identity. See, when we look to prophetic confirmation, sometimes we need a confirmation to help us, to strengthen us, to help us fortify our identity and fortify our purpose. And so that's why we have prophetic ministry. At every campus, we have prophetic ministry at our session times, and you can go down there and you can get an encouraging word. And sometimes prophetic ministry, when we get those words, sometimes it's confirming, sometimes it's telling us something new. But either way, it helps to move us and helps us to align with the Word of God. It helps to fortify our identity. So if you're looking for a way to strengthen your identity, begin to get some prophetic ministry, get some prophetic words. And here's what I really want to encourage you. And if you really want to get some good ministry, get some prophetic friends, right? Because when your crew becomes prophetic, they begin to speak who God says you are. They begin to speak who God has called you to be. They begin to speak who your identity is. And when they see you behaving in a way that is different than who God called you to be, they begin to challenge you on that. See, that's what a good crew does. So Gideon obeyed. He blew the horn, then he asked for confirmation. And then God gives him that. He gives him that prophetic insight. I know there has probably been very few things that have been more encouraging to Kim and I than our prophetic words. Every prophetic word I've ever got, I've typed it out. I keep it in a folder. I keep it in a binder. And I know that even many years ago, when I was wondering about ministry, I shared with you an early testimony about October of 1999, how I had this encounter with Jesus and how I died to my career. And then God made the career take off. But I did know in that moment, Kim and I both knew, that there was some sort of full-time ministry in our future. We just didn't know what it was. We thought it was being a missionary in Africa. That clearly turned out not to be the case. And so we went through several things, and it was several years, about 3 years later, when no doors had opened. And we believed that there was something there, but we just didn't understand. We weren't there, and I was in a worship service here at Trinity, and I remember just dying to that, putting that on the cross. God, I give up that. Maybe you want us to just be full-time ministry full-time business and then doing ministry as well. And so I ended up dying to that and felt great about it. I felt a great peace. About 3 weeks later, we had a presbytery, which is a prophetic ministry service. And actually right here on this stage that I'm standing on, Kim and I came up, and there were several folks there, but one of them was Pastor Robert Morris, Pastor Josh's dad. And he was giving a prophetic word. Now, Pastor Robert didn't know me from Adam. We'd never met. He didn't know me. And as Kim and I came up on the stage and we walked over this way, as Pastor Robert began to prophesy over us, he said, it's funny when you walked up here, but you remind me of Jimmy Evans, which 12 years later is a funny thing to think about, right? But at that time, we didn't even know what that meant. He said, you remind me of Jimmy Evans when you walked up here. He said, I think you're going to teach like him. I think you're going to preach like him. And he said, you've wondered if you're going to go into ministry, but I want to encourage you, you're right where you're supposed to be. You're in business now, but you're going to go into ministry. And there's going to be a time when you're going to be in business and in ministry. And he went on and said several things. But what that prophetic word did is it helped to reinforce the identity that I'm a son of God, but also the purpose that God has locked in that. And it gave us peace to be able to continue our journey. There's power in getting that kind of confirmation. And so I just want to encourage you that it's important for us to do that. All right, so let's keep going. Judges chapter 7 now. And we're going to see God's sense of humor, right? Now remember, how many folks are they going up against? 145,000. All right, so there's 145,000 enemy down in the valley. Verse 1, so Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and his army got up early and went as far as the spring of Harod. So they did a little march. The armies of Midian were camped north of them in the valley near the hill of Moreh. The Lord said to Gideon, you have too many warriors with you. If I let you fight the Midianites, the Israelites will boast to me that they saved themselves by their own strength. Therefore, tell the people, whoever is timid or afraid. Now, I want you to see those two words, okay? Whoever is timid or afraid may leave this mountain and go home. So 22,000 of them went home, leaving only 10,000 who were willing to fight. All right, so Gideon had a 70% reduction in his forces just by asking the question, whoever's timid or whoever's afraid, right? Now, just to put this in context, they're going against 145,000 people. It makes sense for somebody to be a little bit timid and a little bit afraid when you got a 32,000 person army going against 145,000. So his odds went from 5-1 to 15-1 in terms of how many warriors there were per enemy. So they were going to have to kill 5 people apiece. Now they're going to have to kill 15 apiece. But this is interesting here, because I think this thing that Gideon went through, this reduction of forces, the 22,000 who left and who went away because they were timid and afraid, is representative of a lot of the people that we sometimes have in our crew. Because remember, we're talking about the people that we have around us and how they reinforce your identity. And I want to encourage you, if the people who are around you, and again, we're around a lot of people. I'm talking about the close crew, right? I'm talking about the ones that are uptight. I'm talking about the ones that we're looking to reinforce our identity and who we are in God. If they are timid, which means lacking courage, or if they're afraid, which means motivated by fear, if they are timid or afraid, then what they are going to reflect back on us is a picture of timidity and fear, of lack of courage and fear. They're going to keep us from becoming everything that we are called to be, because what they're going to encourage us to do is hold back. Don't make waves. Don't make waves. You don't need to behave that way. There's no reason to stir up a fuss. There's no reason to cause a problem about this. You know what? We just need to be more tolerant. We just need to be more tolerant of what's going on. Now, we should always love everybody we come in contact with, right? That's what Jesus did. We're going to change the world with love, not with anger or hate speech or any of that stuff. We should love everybody, but I don't have to tolerate sin just because of timidity and fear.
That's right.
Just because there might be a cancel culture out there that says that if you stand up for the truth, somebody might come against you. And what happens, and is what is happening in our culture so strongly right now, is this response of timidity and fear is allowing the enemy to just run rampant. And it is keeping us as epic warriors from stepping in to the identity of who it is that we're called to be. One of the things I love about Jesus, when I go back and I study, and you look at the 12 guys that Jesus picked to be his apostles, right? And I don't know if you've seen the TV show Chosen. You know, if you haven't, I highly encourage it. You can download the app. You can watch it that way. It's amazing. But you kind of get a good view of the nature of these guys. And just, I mean this with all due respect, he didn't go after the sharpest tools in the shed. Okay? He didn't go after the elite. He didn't go after those that he had it all thought together. I don't think Jesus's qualification for an apostle, or who is going to be his disciple, was who was going to have the most influence, the biggest reach on Instagram. I don't think that was Jesus's primary character trait that he was looking for. I think he was looking for people who didn't give up. I think he was looking for people who weren't afraid to go against the flow, who weren't afraid to stand up, who were bold even if they were wrong, right? I mean, that's like James and John. God, do you want us to destroy, Jesus, do you want us to destroy this city? Do you want us to call down fire from heaven? And Jesus is like, no, I don't want you to destroy the city, but thanks for being active. Thanks for being aggressive, thanks for thinking about, thanks for not running away, And Peter, always putting his foot in his mouth, right? But yet he's always being aggressive for God. And then we see when Jesus speaks to the disciples, and they all follow him around. This is the broad group. They followed him around after he fed the 5,000, and he gives them some hard teaching about eating his flesh and drinking his blood. Obviously, he was talking about communion. They didn't understand that. And it says that there was a hard teaching, and so they all left except for the 12. And Jesus turns around and looks at the 12 and goes, are you guys going to leave too? And they're kind of like, well, where else would we go? You have the words of life. We're going to follow you. In other words, we have no idea what you're saying. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but we're with you. They weren't timid and they weren't afraid. And when you're defining your crew, we have to find people who are not timid and not afraid. Now let me put this in a real practical term, because I see this happen all the time. Sometimes when your marriage is maybe going through a rough patch, right? Your marriage is going through a rough patch, and maybe you're beginning to contemplate about, maybe this just isn't going to work. Maybe we're at the point of divorce and our marriage just isn't going to work. And so I saw this all the time happening when I was in business. People would then, what they would do is they would start gathering around people who were divorced. Do you know that your divorced friends are the worst people to give you marriage advice? Especially if you're contemplating divorce. Because what are they going to do? Instead of trying to encourage you and give you courage and give you faith to live the life that God has called you to do, they're going to naturally pull you into their area of timidity and fear. And so they're going to recommend, you should get a divorce. You should leave that loser. Because it's going to reinforce. You see why it's so important to pick our crew. Because our crew is going to speak life into us, and they're going to speak faith into us. They're going to speak courage into us, or they're going to pull us away. And that's what Gideon was fighting with here. So God had to reduce that. And I think part of it was God, obviously, as he stated in the text, God was trying to reduce the number because he wanted it to be a great victory. But I also think he wanted to make sure Gideon was surrounded by men that believed in God and believed in what he was going to do. He was looking for friends who were willing to fight. And that's what he got. So we got 10,000 that were willing to fight. All right, so as we kind of go through our life, I want to encourage you in one thing in this place before we go to the next point. And that is, winter seasons will show you who your true friends are. Winter seasons. When we're going through a hard time, when you're going through a challenge, when things are difficult and not easy, when you don't have much to offer them, that's when you find out who your true friends are. That's when you find out who the folks that are on your inner circle are. All of the dear friends that I have in my life, and I have a bunch of amazing folks that are in my life, that all of us have been through seasons of war together, fighting for one another's life, literally, as maybe they're going through different medical situations, dealing with relational issues, going through things together as a church, as elders in a church or whatever. All of those things, when you go through the winter seasons, that's where you find where somebody, who they true are and who your true friends are. So point number 2 is having a crew of courageous, faith-filled friends is what strengthens your identity. Courageous, faith-filled friends. And if you want to know how to get a courageous, faith-filled friend, it's pretty easy. Be a courageous, faith-filled friend. A lot of times what we want to do is we want courageous, faith-filled friends who are going to be with us in a winter. If you want those, you got to be a courageous, faith-filled friend who's willing to go through a winter with somebody else. You got to go through their hard times with them. You got to go through the difficult times with them. You got to hang in there with them in those challenging times, and I promise you, you will get lifelong friends out of that. All right, let's keep going here. Judges chapter 7, verse 4. But the Lord told Gideon, here's the Lord's sense of humor again, there's still too many. You're 15-1, odds are too great. Bring them down to the spring, and I will test them to determine who will go with you and who will not. When Gideon took his warriors down to the water, the Lord told him, divide them into 2 groups. In one group, put all of those who cup water in their hands and lap it up like dogs with their tongues. In the other group, put all those who kneel down and drink with their mouths in the stream. Now, what a fascinating thing that God's doing here. Only 300 of the men drank like dogs. There you go. So that was the delineating factor. All the others got down on their knees and drank with their mouths in the stream. The Lord told Gideon, with these 300 men, I will rescue you and give you victory over the Midianites. Send all the others home. So Gideon collected the provisions and ram's horns and all the warriors, of all the other warriors, sent them home, but he kept the 300. So now he's down to 1% of the army he started with, right? He's got 300 going against 145,000. That's 500 to 1. And God used this weird kind of delineation to separate him out. Now remember, of these 10,000, all of them were willing to fight, right? Because that was the prior, tranche that got cut off. So they're all willing to fight. These are good men. These are men of courage. These are men who are ready to go in a fight. They're ready to put their life down. They're ready to sacrifice. But of the 10,000, it was still too many. And so they go to the water. They've been marching all day long. They come up to this little stream. It's not a big stream, it's just a spring. They come up to this stream, and there's 2 types of people. And I want you to see this picture. I'm not going to do it for you. Just imagine, so I don't have to lay down on the stage, okay? So there's a stream, been marching all day. And so what some of them do is they just kind of drop their gear. They put their hands on the ground. They stick their face in the water, and they're just drinking up the stream, right? I mean, they just put their face in, get as much water as they can. And then there's 300 who stop, and they kneel down, and they pick up water with one hand and they bring it to their mouth. Pick up water with one hand, bring it to their mouth. Pick up water, bring it to their mouth. All right, so here's the delineation between the 2. Those that stuck their face in the ground didn't have a lot of wisdom. Now, it was probably just lack of experience. They probably hadn't been trained warriors. They probably hadn't been around battle much. Gideon and his crew had not seen a lot of war. And so they were just untrained. So they were willing, but they weren't wise. Why were they not wise? Because when you drop your sword, when you drop your spear and you put your face in, an ambush would kill everybody, right? They just lacked wisdom. They just weren't wise. But all of the warriors who kept a spear in their hand, kept a sword in their hand, and did it this way, they kept their eyes up so they could see what was happening. They were ready for an attack. Okay, these were wise warriors. So there was foolish and there were wise. Both willing, but there were wise ones and there were foolish ones. And so what the thing here is point number 3 that I want us to see is wise friends help our true identity be expressed in our true purpose. So we have to recognize that we have friends that are willing to fight, but they may not have the wisdom yet. They may not have the wisdom that is necessary to begin to lead. I remember Mark Driscoll here in Zion of 2018, 3 years ago, gave a great message, and he talked about 3 types of friends that we have in our friend group. We have wise friends. These are the ones that call us up. These are the ones that are paying attention. They care about our purpose, not just their purpose. We have wise friends. These are the ones that really do reinforce our identity. We have foolish friends. These can be friends that just lead us off the wrong path. You know, there may be a lot of fun to be around, but they don't make the best decisions. And, you know, they're not evil, but they're just kind of, you know, they're just foolish. They just don't have wisdom yet. Maybe they just lack experience, like some of these warriors here with Gideon. And then there's dangerous friends. Now, what we have to do is we have to recognize that those 3 kinds of friends can exist in our life. What we have to do is we have to cut off the dangerous friends. Dangerous friends will get you killed. Dangerous friends will have your identity be stripped because all they want to do is lead you into folly. They want to lead you into their lifestyle. They want to take you down the wrong path. If you have dangerous friends in your life, it's okay to block them on your cell phone. It's okay to not respond to their text. It's okay to cut him off. You guys have heard Pastor Jimmy Evans' testimony. The day he got saved, the Lord told him, I want you to go and break off relationship with all of your friends. And it's harder today because of electronics. But you can block them. You can cut them off and you can block them. That's what you have to do to dangerous friends. It doesn't mean you're being a bad friend. It means you're making a conscious choice that I'm not going to be led down that path. And then there are 2 others. There are wise friends and foolish friends. What we have to do is we have to make sure that we can spend time with both. There's nothing wrong with having a foolish friend. What we just want to do, though, is we don't look to our foolish friend to define our identity. We don't let them get so close to us that our foolish friends are trying to tell us who we are. We want our wise friends to be the ones that we're looking to reinforce our identity. It's our wise friends who we look to, who are going to shape us, who are going to strengthen us, who are going to call us up, who are going to encourage us, and are going to bring us to a place of fulfilling the destiny that God has. I was just tidying up my message yesterday, and I was just finishing it, and I was just emailing it off, and I had just, was looking at this phrase here of wise friends help our true identity be expressed in our true purpose. And Dr. Dan Matters, who's one of our elders here and one of my dearest friends, he called me because he wanted to talk about something, and so we're talking about this issue that we're just talking about, and then finally he just goes, Jimmy, I just got to tell you. Now, this is who you are. And he begins to tell me who I am. You are a leader, and this is what you need to be doing. And I got to tell you, I'm tired of you, spending too much time over here because you've got a purpose and you've got a calling. And, and so he's just speaking it. And I'm just like, Dan, you're just preaching my sermon for me. Because you as a friend are calling me, telling me who I am, and telling me what my true purpose is. Now, let me tell you, those are the friends you want in your life. You want friends who are calling you up and calling you in, because when you have those, then we get to experience the full expression of the identity and the full expression of the purpose that God has. We get to choose who we let set our identity. We look to God and we believe that we are His finished masterpiece. We let our identity be in God so that our authority flows through His kingdom. We look to Jesus and we let ourselves be transformed to become more and more like Him. And we look to our purposefully chosen circle of friends. And together with our courageous, faith-filled crew, we're sure to experience the epic life that God has for us. And I want to encourage you, if you don't have that group of friends right now, if you don't have that, if you're hearing this and you're thinking, I would love to have friends like that. Well, let me tell you, there's no secret to it. Be that kind of friend. Be that kind of friend. That's why we do things that we do at church. That's why we have opportunities for you to connect in small groups. That's why there's opportunities for you to get on the dream team and get connected with other leaders. There are so many ways for you to get connected. If you feel like I just don't have that kind of crew in my life, begin to pray about it. Ask God for a crew that you can run with. Be active in trying to find a place to connect, a place where you're going to find those kinds of people. You may not find them at work. You may not even find them in your own family. You're certainly not going to find them, out partying somewhere. But if you focus on, I want to find those kind of friends, and you begin to invest in church, you begin to connect with other people, I promise you, God has a warrior crew that is destined for you to help you become everything that you're called to be, because you're called to be somebody else's crew. You're called to speak into their identity. You're called to encourage them in their purpose. And when we come together and do that, I'm telling you, you are undefeatable in God's kingdom.